The First Minister was condemned for attempting to lay blame for the SNP government's numerous NHS failures, including drug deaths and delayed discharges, at the doors of the Tory government from the 1980s. John Swinney was condemned after he attempted to blame Margaret Thatcher and policies from the 1980s for the SNP's 17 years of failure in healthcare. And his backbench MSPs were branded clapping seals for supporting the record number of drugs and alcohol deaths in Scotland at a heated FMQs. He was also accused of focusing on independence over trying to make the country healthier, with Scottish Tory leader Douglas Ross insisting that the SNP was bad for Scotland's health. He listed a number of nationalist failures, including delayed discharge and thousands of Scots being on waiting lists. Despite the SNP being in power since 2007, and healthcare being devolved, the First Minister attempted to blame policies from the 1980s for this. He said, "One of the things Douglas Ross put to me was about alcohol-related deaths, and I want to share a quote with Parliament because it's the type of evidence that the Parliament has to chew over and consider when we're dealing with the kind of rhetoric that we hear from Douglas Ross." Professor Jamie McCartney, the Professor of Wellbeing and Economy at Glasgow University, said this, and I quote, "You see lag defects from decades ago of urban planning, policy decisions, and the 1980s economic changes, and how that translated into people's alcohol deaths a decade or 2 decades later. So it is not unprecedented. I simply put that evidence to Parliament because we have to understand the consequences of the devastation wreaked on our country by the policies of Margaret Thatcher's Conservative government." Mr. Ross hit out at the First Minister, pointing out that while he is considerably older than him, he is blaming the failures here in Scotland now to a period before I was born, and apparently it has nothing to do with the 17 years the SNP have been in charge. He added, "We know that apart from separating Scotland from the rest of the UK, nothing else matters to John Swinney. Independence will always come first before our NHS, before jobs, before schools, before the economy, before everything. People up and down Scotland want the focus to be on these issues, the things that really matter today, but we all know what John Swinney wants. If it's not page 1, line 1, it's not the priority for the SNP. Right now in 2024, the SNP leader from 2004 is trying to take us back to the division of 2014. We've had 17 years of decline and broken promises. Isn't it time to finally move on from the division of this SNP government and focus on the issues that really matter in Scotland?" Mr. Ross also pointed out that alcohol deaths were at their highest level in 16 years, and that Scotland was the drug deaths capital of Europe. Life expectancy in Scotland is also lower after 17 years of SNP government. Mr. Swinney hit back by insisting that the Tories would have stripped money from the NHS and paid it out to the hospitality sector in the last budget after business rates were cut in England but not in Scotland. This was applauded by SNP MSPs, which provoked the Scottish Tory leader to say, "John Swinney wants to get applause from the clapping seals behind him for record drug deaths in Scotland." He was reprimanded by the presiding officer for insulting the Nat backbenchers.